before, if you had 1 million followers, that means that your followers were going to see your content. But that's no longer the case anymore. The only thing that's going to determine whether your 1 million followers actually see the content today is whether the algorithms think that the people who are following you actually want to watch that content. That's why you see people who have all these followers but have absolutely no engagement. And on the opposite spectrum, you can take someone who's completely new to the game, and if they actually learn how to crack the code on organic, then these algorithms will literally share it far and wide to as many people as they think are going to watch it, because the only thing that they care about is watch time. Everything else is a secondary metric. And why is that? If you want to understand how the game works, you have to understand what the incentive is for the platforms. And if they're selling advertising, and if that's the main form of how they make money, then what do they need to make that money? They need attention.
Pedro, you were a top 1% sales closer for Tony Robbins. You built and ran marketing for multiple 8 and 9-figure companies, and you've launched many of your own companies. I want to talk about all sorts of stuff with you, but first and foremost, what do you think the most overrated tactic is for people that have never even hit their first million?
Launch too many offers. I think a lot of entrepreneurs are doing way too many things. I have a philosophy which is simple scales. I think if you have the right offer, you can take one offer, not to just 1 million, but you can take it to over 9 figures.
How much time do you think you should spend on crafting that offer? Do you think you can power through a bad offer to take it to 1 million or 10 million? Or do you think you need to back out and make sure that you have the right thing before you do that?
I think you shouldn't spend that much time on it. And the reason why is I think you should create a hypothesis as quickly as possible, and you should test your assumptions by actually putting it out there in front of customers and seeing how those customers actually respond
Mm.
and whether people want to give you money. And only if they want to give you money do you then continue down that path. But you can learn that in 1 or 2 days. Um, that's the way I've always approached it.
Give me the short path to learning that in 1 or 2 days.
You put an offer together. If you're advertising, you create a landing page, create a funnel, you put it out there, you talk to customers, you make them the offer. Um, you decide how many customers you would talk to validate whether that offer is successful or not. So let's just say it's 10 people. If you talk to 10 of your ideal customers and no one's buying, then something clearly is not right.
Yep. I like that. So you've stepped into a couple different 8-figure companies to run marketing and drive it.
Right.
What are the things that are different about managing marketing? And I'm not going to say managing, but let's say like high ROI levers for a company that's doing 8 figures versus somebody that's at 1 or 2 million.
Lever, uh, someone who's doing 10 million, you said?
Let's say 2 million versus 20 million.
I think it really depends on how someone's acquiring customers, right? So, in the marketing world, if you're advertising, really for that level of scale, um, you have to get really good at creating creative at scale, right? So, where maybe you can get to 1 million with just a handful of different creatives that are driving to a proven campaign. I think if you're making $1 million a month, as an example, you're probably running 100 to 150 creatives that are live at any given time, and those creatives fatigue, which means you need to create new winners. So it's always this race in terms of like um, getting the next piece of creative out there and beating your previous one, knowing that that one at some point is going to have an expiration date. I think for a company that's probably doing 7 figures, um, I would follow the same exact approach, but I think the level of volume that's ultimately needed to hit that goal looks a little bit different, in my opinion.
Meaning that you need to test less or more creatives on the front end.
A lot more,
Yeah.
a lot more. Um, it's the number one thing. I mean, once you have a proven offer, it's all creative. It's 100% creative. I would go as far as saying that I think media buying is a dying industry, and the ability to create great creative is going to be it is the competitive advantage currently, and it's really where the world is going.
let me break that apart a little bit. So the language that you're using, non-marketers might not know what you're saying.
Okay.
Just because I think the term creative for new entrepreneurs, um, or media buying, even for that matter, are kind of like these elements of if you don't speak the language, you don't know what to do, and sometimes you don't know what questions to ask. But today, if you're not doing paid media, if you're not buying ads on one of the big platforms, Meta, Google, then you're relying on organic content in one of the
Right.
social platforms. And the type of content that you put out, which is your creative, will be a different format. But I think the point that you just made is that either way, the content that works, that converts, is the key to everything.
That's right.
That's the fundamental.
That's right. It's
And
absolutely everything.
And so for the new people, I think some of the message that you get from people that are the messaging that I hear all the time from sort of the social guru people, and I said that sort of with air quotes, but some of them are very smart, and I don't discount this advice at all, which is uh, you have to produce more than you expected to produce. Um, and when somebody thinks they're producing a lot, the people that are really succeeding might be producing 100 times more.
100%. I'll give you an example as it relates to paid media specifically, and we talk about organic or any other form of media that you might want to go into. But with paid media, before, what the way it used to work is that, let's say you created 10 different videos or 10 different static images that you would put out there and actually publish. You would say, okay, well, let's give $100 to every single one. And in that scenario, the media buyer has control. But in today's world, you don't want control. You actually want the algorithms and the platforms actually to have control. And so I might put 20 different pieces of creative, again, defined as video or static or any other version of that. And what you really want to do is you want to allow the system to decide, because as you're training it, you ultimately want the system to decide where that budget really goes, because it's learning, and that's the direction that these companies are moving in
Mm,
ultimately. Does that make sense?
it does make sense. What does that look like for somebody pushing a bunch of content on organic versus pushing a bunch of paid ads?
Well, I think what's changed in the organic landscape is that before, if you had a million followers, that means that your followers were going to see your content.
Yeah.
But that's no longer the case anymore. The only thing that's going to determine whether your million followers actually see the content today is whether the algorithms think that the people who are following you actually want to watch that content.
Mm,
And so that's why you see people who have all these followers but have absolutely no engagement. And on the opposite spectrum, you can take someone who's completely new to the game. And if they actually learn how to crack the code on organic, then if you put it out there, these algorithms will literally share it far and wide, to as many people as they think are going to watch it, because the only thing that they care about is watch time.
mhm,
Everything else is a secondary metric. And why is that? If you want to understand how the game works, you have to understand um, what the incentive is for the platforms.
mhm.
And if they're selling advertising, and if that's the main form of how they make money, then what do they need to make that money? They need attention.
Eyeballs.
They need eyeballs. And if I followed somebody 10 years ago and my interests have changed, if I just put that content, if the system puts that content now in front of that same person, they don't care because their interests have changed.
Mhm.
And these platforms have learned that over time. And as a result of that, they've gone smart. And TikTok was the first one to pioneer all this, and really all the platforms are following.
Do you have a preference of platform for organic?
I think the only right way to answer that is, who's your customer?
Mm,
If I was serving and trying to sell to a demographic that was 20 to 25 years old, then I'll be on Snapchat, I'll be on TikTok. If I'm trying to sell to a much more sophisticated audience of entrepreneurs, then I'm going to be where entrepreneurs are, which is probably Instagram, which is probably YouTube, which is probably LinkedIn. Um, I'm platform agnostic. I'm all about being where my customer is, and I want to be in all those places.
mm. I love that. I think that that's a good lesson in from an operations and sales perspective too. So when you're looking at marketing automation internally or customer service or sales internally, you can try to drive people through email or a ticketing system or a phone call or a text message. But if they're living in DMs, that's where you're going to find them.
That's right.
Uh,
One thing I'll add to that is like the way that most customers are buying now is not singular, right? So I'm massive when it comes to data. And I track everything end to end, which means that first click, first time they became aware of the brand, all the way through to when they became a customer. If you actually study the data, what you'll find and what everyone wants is that hopefully someone finds you and immediately within a very short time frame they become a customer, and they think about it very linearly. But if you actually study the behavior, what you'll find, which is probably why you do a podcast like this as an example, they might hear about your company, but then what they'll do is they'll look at your social. What they'll do is they'll look at the website. They'll find you in a wide range of different places. And if you were to track the first time they find about you to the time they became a customer, what you'll find is that in most cases, they're hopping around in multiple different ways before they actually ever swipe their credit card and become a customer. And so I think starting off in a very focused way, if you're a seven-figure entrepreneur, as an example, then that makes sense. But when you're trying to go from 7 to 8 or 8 to 9 or even beyond, that's where really optimizing your brand to have a presence in multiple different places and having a sense of excellence on how you're showing up on multiple platforms, including your website, including your podcast, including multiple social media platforms, um, you're going to notice that your conversion rates are going to go way up at that point.
yeah, that makes sense to me. I think that the conundrum for many entrepreneurs is the desire to be everywhere and the inability to be everywhere at once quickly.
Right.
Right. There's this sense of urgency. Yeah, I think every entrepreneur handles this differently, but the entrepreneur archetype is the ADD, get it all done and run
Right.
around and focus on everything at once.
Well, that doesn't work.
No, no, no. That's a tough path to lead, to follow, I suppose. But uh, that being the case, and this is, I like to balance between specifics and sort of strategic generalities. And so I appreciate the call outs of, it depends whenever it's necessary. But where do you start? Let's say that you found product market fit. Let's say that you've gotten to a couple million. Let's say that you've done that through your website in traditional, sort of marketing methods. Maybe you go paid. What platforms do you pursue after if you're selling, um, a B2C consumer product?
Yeah, it's a great example. So if I were to reverse engineer that, well, first and foremost, there's what I think. And then there's also, I love to stress test my thinking all the time, even when it comes to like even prioritizing, like, what am I going to do today? What am I going to do this week? And I think something that I would recommend that every entrepreneur does is, work with some sort of AI tool as an example to stress test their planning and stress test their thinking in terms of what is actually the most important thing that they could be working on at any given time. And I know for me personally, that's been a huge unlock because there's always competing priorities and things that a bunch of things that I know that I need to do. But the reality is that there's only really two or one that actually like are going to move the needle in a massively meaningful way. And I have to think through that process to arrive at that one or two and make the hard decision on a daily basis, weekly basis, and also for the focus of my team ultimately at the end of the day in terms of what actually matters. And so that's like just a tip I would give in general to everyone who's like planning. But if you're selling a B2C product as an example, I would just start with the question of like, well, where's your customer? Right? Chances are most people who buy B2C products, they're probably on Instagram. If you're selling to a younger demographic, then TikTok's obviously massive for that. Pinterest is also incredible for that. Um, I would start like trying to reverse engineer where are people in that market currently buying? And in today's world, that's so easy to find, right? You can look at the different libraries of your competitors that are advertising. You can see how many ads they have live in all these different platforms. And the reason why that's an insightful thing for me is because that tells me approximately how much money they're spending. So if someone has 20 ads live on one platform and they have 200 ads live on another platform, as an example, or even organic content, it tells me that they're probably getting a better result there
Hmm.
for starters. So that might influence ultimately where I start because I know someone's already winning the game there, right? So I think where I would start is where probably other people are having success, unless I'm the first one. And if I'm the first one to open up a new category, I would think through that process through the lens of what's something that's similar that's already succeeding? Where's that thing already succeeding? And then make the decision to ultimately start there. I personally like Facebook and Instagram just because it's so lean, it's so simple. Um, to crack the code on a platform like YouTube, I think obviously it's possible. So many people have done it. It's just harder. And so if you want to look at where you're going to be able to test things really quickly, test your assumptions, a platform like Facebook, Instagram, or TikTok is just going to be an extremely lean way to get learnings really quickly that then you can roll over to a platform that might require more bandwidth in terms of getting that to work.
I love that. I like that answer. Which plays into kind of where my head is, I guess, which is, some of these things, it is easy to say, first of all, caveat, be careful whose patterns you're following.
Right.
Just because they produced a bunch of content on a platform doesn't mean that it's working.
That's right. Well,
Uh,
you can look at deeper metrics.
well, and I think the ads make more sense than just organic, right? If
Right.
somebody's pushing a bunch of time and energy into organic, it doesn't mean that they're selling anything on the back end
That's right.
because people are vain. Uh, Also, if they're spending a bunch of money on ads on a platform and they're not funded, they definitely have to be getting an ROI if
That's
they've been
right.
doing it for a long time.
One of my favorite ways to use organic content um, is to actually put out organic content to get a sense of what the market's going to respond to. One of the simplest connections that most people don't connect for whatever reason, which baffles me, is that organic content and paid content live on the same exact feed.
Mm,
And so if you can't crack the code on organic, you're probably not going to crack the code on paid,
mm,
and vice versa as it relates to the creative piece, right? Because sometimes you can crack a code on paid, but you're just going to pay more for it,
mm.
right? So I love paid because it's going to get me learnings quickly. But if I want efficiency, then I need to get good at creating organic content because I can use that same exact content, stick a call to action on it as long as it's related to the thing that I'm selling, and it's going to do really well on paid.
Oh, that's interesting. Well, relative to the different platforms, so I like the idea of segmenting things based on opportunity to iterate quickly, simplicity of the platform, um, and if, but in terms of targeting audience, I think a murkier area from my perspective is entrepreneurship. So you're selling to entrepreneurs, and we'll talk about your new venture in a little bit. But let's say you're selling to business owners, age 20 to 60.
Mhm,
Fuck, any of the platforms hold
mhm,
those people,
mhm.
right? Certainly, young entrepreneurs are on TikTok and Snap. Certainly, older entrepreneurs are on LinkedIn and Facebook, and they're probably all on Instagram. Maybe not the youngest, but so where do you start? Does it
So
matter?
it's a great question. I think I would probably approach it. I would approach it in a completely different way.
Mm,
Um, Most people are thinking about like demographically, well, age group wise, like let me tell the system that I'm selling to people like 20 to 60 years old or whatever it is. A lot of those features are really going away on these platforms, especially through paid traffic.
mm.
And
What features like age targeting?
age targeting as an example, or even saying, "Hey, I'm targeting entrepreneurs," as an
Mm,
example. I'm running all my ads that I'm running right now don't say any age group related to it. They don't say that I'm serving entrepreneurs, but that is my audience.
mm,
Well, why do I do that? Because actually, the number one way that you can send the right signal to these platforms is actually your copy and your creative. So, does your creative actually speak to the demographic that you're trying to target? right? So does your videos, do your statics reflect something that that demographic would actually want to watch, right? Because that's what's going to give the system the signal to put it in front of them. The landing pages, as an example, does the copy that's on there reflect the demographics that you're actually trying to target? And that's targeting in 2025, 2026.
Mm.
That's what that looks like. Getting that right is actually, I think, a lot more important than if they are in all these platforms, then I think getting that right is probably the more important thing that we could be doing.
Which functionally goes back to the offer
That's right.
and then the copy around the offer.
That's right.
Interesting. Uh, you're a marketing guy. Is sales or marketing a more important skill to have?
That's like saying, do I want water or air? I'll take both.
Yeah.
I'll absolutely take both. I think the more important skill, I think any success that I've had over the course of my career, has been more about my mindset in terms of how I approach solving problems. In fact, there's probably a lot of people who are maybe listening to me right now that are significantly smarter than me. But the one thing that I have that a lot of people don't have is an ability to create experiments and be able to validate those experiments. It's kind of like lean startup thinking. It is my superpower.
Mm.
And it is the superpower of entrepreneurs that don't have hobbies, but actually are making money.
Mm.
And what that actually looks like in practicality is I'll give you an example in my own business. Um, there was this grand vision of what I wanted to create, right? But like every entrepreneur, you're always constrained in either time, resource, team, whatever it is. And instead of launching the thing that I wanted to launch, really what I ended up launching was an information product on the thing, and I sold it for 47 bucks. And what I wanted to ultimately validate in that was there a segment of people that I thought I wanted to serve? Were they interested in this topic?
Mm.
Because if someone's not willing to buy information, then they're probably not willing to buy something that's going to be significantly more expensive. And it was just a I threw up a sales page, took me a day to write it. Um, Threw up a checkout page, threw up some ads, and I got some learnings immediately. And I think what a lot of us want to do is we spend all this time building the perfect version of what we want to do, where the more important thing that we can be doing is just getting learnings.
Mhm.
Recently, this past week, I sponsored 2 different events. We were there, and I spoke to 60 customers, 60 prospects, I should say, who were ideal client avatars. And I looked them in the eyes and I had conversations with them. I gave them what I thought my pitch was, right? And even though few of those did convert, I also learned a ton from it. As a founder of a company that I would say is successful, I still occasionally take sales calls for now. Why? Because I'm testing things. I'm the guinea pig, right?
Mm.
Um, I'm changing the offer in some cases 2 to 3 times a week, and I'm refining it just based off what the customers are ultimately telling me. And then I go to my team and I say, "Hey, do this." And it's a very different mindset.
Uh, I think that it is endlessly frustrating for brand new entrepreneurs, but specifically for uh, teenagers and early 20s to hear mindset is the most important thing because it seems cliche and you're like, yeah, 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 but what do I do? uh, you grew up in the Bronx at 5. You made the decision to be a millionaire. How did you develop that mindset and how did that mindset play out in the rest of your life or get developed through the rest of your life?
It's a great question. Mindset for me was like always one of those things that I grew up hearing a lot about, and you have no fucking clue what it actually means.
Right.
Um, and I would hear teachers like Tony Robbins that I spent a lot of time around saying it's like 80% of your success is your psychology. 20% of it is the actual mechanics. I'm like, okay.
Right. What
um,
does that mean?
I think what it's meant for me, and I think when I speak from my experience. I'm not here to tell someone this is what your definition should be, but this is what I've learned in my journey, and I am also still learning every single day, and staying very humble in my approach. And also, I think I'm okay with contradicting myself.
Mm.
This is the belief that I hold today, and tomorrow I might hold a new belief. and I reserve the right to that.
Mm,
Um, for me, mindset is there's a lot of things that usually get in the way of someone succeeding, but it's usually not from lack of knowing what to do. I think a lot of us know what to do, um, but for whatever reason, we just continue to get in our way. Um, and so, mindset is getting those things out the way so that you can experience yourself as a phenomenon.
that's an interesting way to think about it.
Because so I've had a belief my whole life, ever since I was a little boy, since that moment, I was destined for really big things. So if I believe this and I know this deeply in my heart and my soul, then why is it that at different times in my life that my reality has not caught up with what I know and what I feel? And if that is true, then something ultimately has got to give. I think what it comes down to is I think mindset is the process of getting out of your own way to experience yourself as a phenomenon, but beyond that, it's building unshakable certainty that is building unshakable certainty as it relates to a particular outcome that you're after.
How do you do that without evidence?
You find the evidence. Um, so one of the most important exercise that I've done with one of my mentors, David Bear, as an example. I don't know if you know David, one of the most incredible mindset coaches in the world.
I know the name. I don't know
Well,
if
you
I
should
know him.
have him on your podcast.
Yeah?
I'll make the introduction.
Awesome.
Um, and one of the things that he says is, um, whenever you're looking at,
Oh, I know David. I just saw David like 2 days ago at
okay,
Justin's thing.
okay, cool, great,
Yeah,
great.
keep going.
So as an example, when you look at a limiting belief, so
Yeah,
like, hey, this is my limiting belief. And then you ask yourself, what's the new belief that you want to actually create? It's all the work. We've all done that work. But I think the question that a lot of us haven't asked ourselves is, what evidence of success do I have that that new belief is true?
mm,
And I think that if we ask that question and we actually take the time to actually answer it, we'll actually realize that we have a lot more evidence that that new belief is true than a lot of us give to take the time to actually realize for ourselves. Um, and you can stack that in your favor, right?
yeah,
And actually start to build something new. Um, and I think developing a mindset is not a one time event.
yeah,
It's I think the master skill is the ability to almost have um, this thing within you that no matter how many times you ultimately fall down, that you just get back up and then you just restart the process. So like here's the limiting belief, here's the new belief, and then again, here's the evidence of success. And just following that process, following that thread time and time and time again. And what starts to happen over time is you little by little, you start to brainwash yourself
yeah,
into actually believing something different.
yeah,
And so much so that I've gotten to the place in my life where I can literally be in the middle of the ocean drowning and feeling like I'm getting exhausted. I don't know how I'm going to make it out this, but I just have to believe something within myself that I'm going to make it through. And this is a true story. And this happened to me one time. I was in Asia and I was drowning, and this random guy just pops out of nowhere with a surfboard and he's like, "Hey, you're okay?" I'm like, "No." And he helps bring me to shore. And I've just found myself in so many experiences like that. Here's a belief for everybody. I personally believe in God. Other people believe in whatever they believe in. I have the belief that God's never let me down, so he's not going to start letting me down now. And so I just get to move boldly through my experiences in life, knowing that that gets to be my reality. And because I believe that that is my reality, life always reflects it. And so another example of that would be, I saw a homeless guy down the street recently, and he happened to be shouting down the street,
as they
and
do.
as they do, um, and I can feel that my partner felt unsafe. And the first response that came out of my mouth was like, "Wow, in another lifetime, that guy could have been an incredible announcer."
Mhm,
He had a beautiful voice, And I think in these moments, you can either train your mind to actually see the worst in people, or you can actually train your mind to see the best in people. And whatever you're in all the ways that we're ultimately judging others, we're just judging ourselves. So it's the inner work. It's the inner work and getting that stuff out the way so that we can experience ourselves as we always have been, and just getting all the stuff that's ultimately just been in the way of us, living out the life that we're meant to live.
Okay, but why were you in the middle of the ocean drowning?
Well, I was so the true story that happened there is that I was surfing. I was some surf lessons,
Uh-huh.
and my instructor was like, "Hey, do you want to swim back?"
Oh, shit.
I was like, "Sure thing." I felt pretty good about it, and then like some riptides just came out of nowhere and just like sucked me in. And I wasn't expecting that. And he left. He didn't
Oh,
wait for me.
God.
He was gone, and I was pretty far from shore. It was a really scary moment.
That is scary. Yeah, I believe, I mean, I fundamentally, I believe that. I also think that it's easier said than done for people, and I think that hearing this is a good starting point for those that don't believe it. But I think that you either are consciously brainwashing yourself or you are getting brainwashed by the things around you.
That's right.
And said another way, repetition is what defines belief, what creates belief. The more data points you have to support something, the more exposure you have to something, the more it's going to establish that being the dominant thing in your life. And you can either decide that you're going to put that thing in front of you all the time so that it turns into the dominant thing in your life, or the rest of the world is going to put it there for you, right? And so it
Yeah.
starts with focus to some extent.
One of the things that I'll never forget was something that I heard Tony Robbins say on stage, and it completely changed my life. He was talking about how when people see him, they look at this man and they're like, "Wow, he's really got it. He's really got it." And I'll never forget what he said next. He said, "I built this motherfucker."
Mm,
And that was the decision that was the moment when I decided I was gonna build this motherfucker.
love it.
And that's the work.
Yeah.
It's more important than building the business because you'll never outgrow your level of leadership. And if you'll never outgrow your level of leadership, then that means that the most important work you can do is actually to grow in your leadership. And I think about it in 4 levels, and my buddy Eli Wild was the first one who gave me this framework for how to think about it. He calls it the 4 levels of leadership. And the first level is, you gotta lead yourself. And when you learn to lead yourself, then you earn the privilege to lead one person.
Mm,
And when you earn the privilege to lead one person, then you earn the privilege to lead many people. And most people think that that's where it stops. But really, the ultimate form of leadership is what's your level of influence when you're not even in the room?
mhm.
That's where we're going. That's what we're trying to do. That's how you build billion-dollar companies, which is the path that I'm on right now.
Well, I think there are lots of ways to do that, and I think there are a lot of shitty people that also build giant companies. I don't know about shitty, but there are people that are not as as dialed into being the best version of themselves. But along those lines, and I want to talk about some of the things, the tactical things here too. But along those lines, one of the I'd like your take on this. I find it frustrating to see this notion of uh, the architecture of the Alcoholics Anonymous group has certainly helped lots of people by having a framework to navigate a difficult problem in life. Also, the notion of self-identifying as an alcoholic and you are always an alcoholic and one day at a time and I'm in you don't recover from being an alcoholic, you are a recovering alcoholic in perpetuity.
Right.
I personally find that to be a very weak position to come from. And I don't like the idea of reiterating the narrative to yourself repeatedly and to others that you're an alcoholic. Why is that the message that you're indoctrinating yourself into, as opposed to showing the strength that you have? How do you see that? And how does that reconcile with your belief system around establishing your own beliefs and who you are?
The one thing that I believe to be true is that if you're gonna change, there needs to be a moment of humility where you need to find yourself almost figuratively energetically on your knees and acknowledging that something needs to change. And so if I were to point out at anything that I like about that process, it's that. Um, I think a lot of us, maybe we realize it or don't realize it, but we have a really big ego. And that ego could be really productive when it's pointed towards the mission as it relates to business. But as it relates to personal change, in my personal life, I have not been able to get to total transformation, not understanding, but actually my lived experience until that has been true across different moments in my life,
Until what has been true?
that there has been a moment of humility.
Oh, got it. Yeah. Yeah. I think, I don't know if I believe that to be an absolute, um, but I think that there are many scenarios that I can point to in life where I believe that to be true.
Well, you see, I can change myself intellectually,
Mhm.
um, but it's different when it's not an intellectual activity and it's my lived experience. Um, I want to change as a lived experience, not as an intellectual activity. And so it's a deeper, in my experience, it's just the next level. Um, which I think everyone can either choose to go in the direction of or not. You know, it's all a personal choice. And I think there's multiple ways to get to the same place.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that I guess I could reframe. I could create some different definitions that would get me closer to that being an absolute. Um, in that that self-awareness doesn't have to be rock bottom, which I think in the world and for many
Right.
people, they perceive that the way that I heard that from you was you need to hit this rock bottom place before you can truly create the change, which I don't believe.
Yeah. Yeah. It doesn't have to be rock bottom,
Yeah.
right? Humility is not necessarily a reflection of rock bottom. Humility is a reflection um, of almost figuratively getting off your throne,
Mm.
you know, to acknowledge where you are, not from a place of judgment, not from a place of putting yourself down, from a place of, "Hey, here's the state of the union."
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I guess I look at that as I don't necessarily look at that as humility so much as I look at it as self-awareness,
yeah,
and there's maybe those are synonyms in certain situations, but I certainly believe that you'll have a hell of a time changing yourself if you're not aware of who you are in the first place,
that's right.
right? Um, so you mentioned Tony Robbins. You spent quite a bit of time in the,
Yeah,
Robbins Research
4 years.
Organization, 4 years.
Yeah,
Um, what, first off, what kind of impact did that have on you and your trajectory as an entrepreneur and as a human?
yeah, it was my real life PhD, what I like to call it. I dropped out of university after being there for a week, and it just got me around the right people. You know, I mean, we've all heard the saying that we're the average of people that we hang out around. Well, I didn't have any positive role models. I grew up in the Bronx in New York City, and it just gave me an opportunity to not only be talking to entrepreneurs, it got me in the room with Tony Robbins, got me in the room with different speakers that I had no idea who they were, and just got me around a positive environment, you know. And I think it's what we all need, you know, an environment that's really stretching us in some way, shape, or form. Um, yeah, it got me around his philosophy, if you will. It had an incredibly positive effect, but in many ways, it also messed me up.
In what way?
That I didn't know who I was.
Mm,
Um, I bought into this ideology of modeling,
mhm,
which is really great and really accelerated my success at a really young age, where I modeled other individuals, but nowhere in that process did I know who I was.
mm.
And that's something that I had to discover on my own, like learn my own personal style, my own personal level of leadership, my own true voice. Um, I was still operating under the lens of Tony Robbins' voice.
One of the things so Tony's had a profound impact on my life. I found him, when I was growing up in sales, and I've had a couple different eras where his work has touched my life. Um, One of the things that I like about him as a character and as a initiative is that it is not prescriptive. So it is not. I got corrected or I was challenged at an event. I was at Date with Destiny. I was in the hallway and I made the comparison to this event and religion. And the person I was talking to said, This is not like a religion at all." And I was like, "Yes, it is." I was like, what do you mean? What are you talking about?" And he said, "Well, religions tell you what sends you to heaven or hell,
Right.
uh, what is good and what is bad. And the structure and framework here is um, what are the actions that allow you to excel as a human and make those choices yourself." And so I think that was an interesting frame shift for me when looking at that work. Um, I could also see that if you are learning the modeling side of it and you're leaning heavily into the modeling, that feeling prescriptive or adopting somebody else's frameworks and losing yourself in it. Um, yeah, that's an interesting thing for me to think about. What are the things inside of the organization that would surprise other people to find out? Because I think when you don't know Tony as a human, and when you see the architecture and the big personality, there's a gap from that. Just then going in and hearing how he actually interacts and works. What's the next layer down to, like, as an organization? Oh, it would surprise you that it actually runs this way.
Yeah, I think one of the most surprising things is one, how little Tony's involved in the day to day. I think that was, and this was back then, man. It's like what, 2012. I think my understanding of it, Tony was involved, I think, a total of like 8 working days across the entire year in the
Oh, wow.
organization. So I found that to be really fascinating that someone can have this level of impact and be so little involved in the day to day. Um, He really lived what he was talking about, you know. Um, I would say that's probably the biggest one, but also like um, that someone like Tony's also not immune to the challenges of a scaling business, and there was a lot of things that needed work
Hmm.
from a cultural level in the organization because it was just growing so fast. I mean, 2012, 2013, that's around the time that his movie came out, his book came out. Um, the company was at an all-time high, and there was definitely a lot of things that needed to be addressed and during that time.
Yeah. I mean, I think, yeah, that makes total sense. Uh, that said, events are a bitch, and a lot of people struggle to put on events and to do them well.
Yeah,
Um, Tony's events are, uh, with or without problems, very well executed,
yeah.
relatively speaking. You have spent a lot of time facilitating events. What did you learn that you transferred, and what did you decide that you did not want to do from that foundation?
I think the number one thing that I transferred is that most people don't actually realize what it actually takes to play at that level of mastery.
Mm.
I remember the first time that I saw the syntax for the Unleash the Power Within event. Like, take a guess. What does that look like to you?
When you say the syntax, you mean the actual script and words?
Like the layout of like, here's what happens day by day.
Mm.
I'll tell you,
Okay.
it's nuts. I mean, it's long. Like minute by minute
Yeah.
is literally documented down to the T.
Yeah.
And then when you're there as an audience member, you just feel like you're having the best experience of your entire life and you're
Yeah.
being completely transformed. But the amount of preparation that actually went into that is absolutely insane. And 99.9% of people will never do that, will never prepare to that level. And Tony is absolutely obsessed at a level that makes no sense at all. Um, And, but that's why he's Tony Robbins.
Mhm.
So I think that's one thing that I've definitely taken in my career. Like it really pays to actually prepare. If you want to be Michael Jordan, then you got to train like Michael Jordan. You got to prepare like Michael Jordan. And that's why there's only one Tony Robbins at the end of the day. Um, and but in terms of like maybe some things that I've done differently over the course of my career. I've done a lot of things, mostly like in the virtual environment, and this is before Tony was even doing like his big virtual events and different things like that.
Yeah.
For me was really like, well, how do I take the things that I've learned here in this live environment, but ultimately bring it into the virtual landscape? And so there was a lot of things that obviously needed to be done differently in that process to make those experiences work. But I had to create my own playbook really because there was no one at the time when I was first starting to do this that essentially wrote the playbook. So I had to kind of create it from scratch.
What were the elements that you took from the live event that you were like, "Shit, this doesn't really translate to virtual," and how did you convert it into a virtual experience?
Attention would probably be the biggest one.
Mm,
If it's one thing to be in person like this and ask someone for your attention, it's a whole different thing for someone to be on a somewhere across the world on a screen, um, and to get them to pay attention the whole time. Show up rates are also a big one.
mm,
Someone committing to fly somewhere because they paid a bunch of money to come to an event versus if they're paying maybe something smaller. And so we had to create strategies to not only get people to show up. We had to create strategies to keep people watching. um, and a lot of the events that I was doing, like they looked live, but they weren't. They were live streamed, which is the
mm,
way that we framed them. But what that allowed us to do is basically think about the minute by minute
mm,
experience that the person was actually seeing. um, and we would see like, hey, here's where someone would drop off as an example. And that allowed us to then take that recording, do something different. And we were split testing essentially different segments of our events that we were doing over the course of multiple days. And we did that for years. But that level of obsession, but just implemented in a completely different way. Like you would have to wait 4 months if your next live event is in 4 months or next year before you're able to split test something. But in the virtual environment, we're able to re-record, we're able to re-edit, we're able to think through that experience that we want to give somebody.
much faster iteration.
Uh,
Yeah, I heard him say years ago, I was listening to him talk about maybe it was a business mastery, and it would have been in 2010, maybe, um, which at that point he had been doing business mastery for years. Um, but I heard him talk about how at the end of his UPWs, which he or the most frequent event that he does, every single time
Brief
debrief and talk about what went well, what didn't go well, how they could improve it
every time,
every single time.
every time.
And that's most people are not willing, not most, basically nobody is willing to do that.
Yeah. And we apply that to the virtual environment as well. So we usually give enough time to obviously collect the revenue after an event. And once we have a sense of like where we landed, then what we would do is we have a whole day meeting, and every single department would prepare their numbers as it relates to how the event did, um, all the way from advertising down to client success. And we would analyze it inside and out. And that's what then gave us the insights into how we were going to make the next one better. And I know one of the themes of this podcast is like, okay, what's the difference between a seven-figure business and an eight, nine-figure business? It's that level of obsession. See, it's easier to launch the new thing because maybe it's not giving you the result that you want.
Mm,
But to study, to analyze, to come up with healthy hypothesis of what we're going to do differently to not only improve the experience, but to improve sales, to improve registrations, for any facet of your marketing and sales. Like that was the mindset from event to event to event. So I once did a virtual event where we had 21,000 people who paid us money to join a virtual event. We filled it up within 6 weeks, 100% through cold traffic. We didn't start there. Our first event was like less than 200 people that
Mm,
signed up. And fast forward 3 years later, we're putting 20,000 plus people into an event. Like, how do we do that? We just obsess about making things better and better and better and better. One of my mindsets around planning, which I would highly recommend that entrepreneurs adapt, is like this good, better, best mindset, right? So, like, what's the good goal? What's the better goal? Then what's the best goal? So every time that we hit a new goal, um, all of a sudden, even if that was the best goal, that automatically becomes the good goal.
mm.
And so we set our planning to always hit the best goal, which is, the most aggressive goal that we can possibly hit, knowing that worst comes to worst, we'll never fall below our standard. And our goal as an entrepreneur, as a leader, is always to be raising the standard of our team and really pushing their mindset as to what they think is possible. And if you frame it in this way and you talk to your team in this way, it's not only believable, it actually starts to happen.
So after your experience with Tony Robbins, and you can fill in the gaps here. I know when I met you a few years ago, and you had worked with a couple different multi 8-figure companies that were clients of ours or that I knew closely, and um, spent a lot of time in marketing there with big budgets. Recently, in prep for this, I came across an interview, and you alluded to this, but I came across an interview titled "Miserable Millions to Building a Business with Soul." I didn't watch it, partly because I have an allergy to woo-woo shit sometimes,
Yeah.
and I feared the path that we were going down with that. Not because I disagree with the sentiment, but because I was like, shit. And what I was looking for was tactical marketing stuff at the time. We started this by talking about sort of leadership alignment and how that facilitates the capacity to create something bigger. Um, Tell me what the sort of realization was around making a bunch of money, but then feeling misaligned. Because you also alluded to it with Tony in saying, I found myself in a position where I didn't know who I was because I was trying to map myself onto somebody else's success profile.
Yeah, I think if I were to strip out all the woo woo from it,
You can throw some in, I'll fuck with you.
I think what it comes down to is chasing a goal without knowing why you're chasing the goal.
Mm,
That's all it is. So if I had this goal since I was 5 years old, because I fell in love I fell in love with the idea of making $1 million at 5 years old. I had no fucking clue I was wanting to make that money. It was just a goal, and that was my fixation for a really long time until I made it happen. Um, there's no why behind it.
mm,
And I didn't know what motivation was until I actually started to find the why, the purpose. Um, One of my good friends, he calls it um, the why that makes you cry, if you will.
mm.
Um, and like really not stopping until you really find it. And yeah, once I learned a better way, ultimately, it was just all about like, I only wanted to do business in that way. I only wanted to do business in a way that where I felt fully engaged in every single way, in every single part of my body, because I knew why I was doing it. I knew why I was building it. It had a bigger purpose that went beyond me and the outcomes that I wanted for my own life. Um, that's really what it came down to.
Uh, so let me map this on to most entrepreneurs. Um, I I have a guiding belief that most people get in their own way. And most fledgling entrepreneurs get in their own way in the name of, I'm supposed to have this divine purpose and mission and directive, and I want to follow my passion and what my purpose is.
It's never been my approach.
Well, I appreciate that. And that's why I want to connect the dots here, and I want to hear more about the story, because that is a recipe for never fucking starting. And my belief is that through doing, you discover.
That's right.
And your language that you used earlier was experimentation. Um, so you were successful managing marketing for multi 8-figure companies and presumably making money doing it.
Correct.
Did you leave? Was there when you realized, hey, I feel misaligned, were you like, I'm fucking done, I'm going to go walk away and find my soul? Or was there a progressive path? What did that look like in practice?
Yeah, so I've gone through that multiple times in my life, and transparently, the first time, that's exactly what it was. Yeah,
Love it.
the first time I shut down a 7-figure business, I was like, I'm fucking miserable. I don't want to do this, and I just need to do some work. But I'm really grateful for it because I learned a lot about myself, and I think knowing more about yourself ultimately is power. And the more that I can trust myself as an entrepreneur, the more that I think others can trust me ultimately because, um, when I talk, they feel me and they know what I'm saying is true.
Mm,
And it's reflected to me literally multiple times a week by complete strangers.
mm,
But that is a skill that I've cultivated to be able to transfer that when I say a few words. Um, but I think I went through something similar like a year and a half ago. I was running my agency. I was doing this work for a bunch of different people for a long time. And I remember I was in Hawaii with my love. And while I was there, we were just kayaking through this stunning river. And my response to her was like, I think I'm done. But I didn't just like shut it down. I kept showing up. I kept on doing the thing. But I was also listening. I was also listening for guidance from life at the same time. I was meeting a lot of people. I was putting myself in positions for that discovery to ultimately take place while still showing up for my commitments. Um, and through that is ultimately how eventually I connected the dots. There was a lot of input that was coming in to ultimately find that discovery in my life personally.
how do you know, looking at those two experiences, I'm done, shut it down, look inward, versus I'm done, keep it going, listen? How do you know when to shut it down versus keep it going when you feel misalignment in both situations?
I think sometimes the keep going, I think the lesson for me there was to stretch and grow
Mm,
in my capacity,
mhm.
which I think also could be really, really healthy. Like, how much discomfort can I actually hold? Which I think was really preparing me for the next season. The answer is I have no fucking clue.
Love it.
But what I can tell you was how I approached it. And I just move in a way that I have a saying. I tell my business partners every single day. We get to move at the speed of alignment,
Mm.
and it's our model for how we show up every single day. It's like when we're not aligned, like something's up, and like that becomes the most important thing that we need to address in the business, no matter what's ultimately going on. Um, and I've cultivated just a really strong intuition, and um, my intuition wasn't necessarily just telling me to shut it all down yet at that time, um, because there was something still that I was learning there. There was something that I was still getting out of it. There was capacity that I was building within myself. Um, and so, yeah, I think it's going to be different for all of us, but that's the path that I took.
Tell me about the newest venture. So before we kicked on the mics, we started talking about it, and then I was like, "Yeah, we should really record this."
Yeah.
So I know I've known your business partner Zion for uh, I think before he moved to Austin. So I met him in maybe 2015, and somebody had brought him into my office, um, and he right away was it was right away it was clear that he was sort of self aware and driven and interesting. And then we sort of lost touch, and I kind of watched him, but he has been running a company that has helped entrepreneurs put assistance in place to help take care of some of the stuff in their life and create a playbook to do so. And recently, you joined forces with him and another party to do a similar but very different company. And you said something interesting to me because I was looking at it and I was saying, and you can tell me the framework between the two businesses and the overlap. But when I heard it, I said it's kind of an extension of the existing company because it has some similar components. It's actually a major component. And you said, no, it has a totally different mission. And I was like, oh, that's an interesting way to look at and think about this. So tell me about Hum and the business that is not it, but that I'm talking about.
Yeah. I think before I answer that question, there's a thing that I think is a way I can answer it, but without answering it directly just yet. Is that
Fun.
yeah, I think a big part of my message and ultimately what I've learned over my life. I remember I heard this teacher once talk about in an interview. He was like, "I know this is going to sound super egotistic, but I'm my greatest teacher,"
Mm,
um, and that's never left me. Because I think what I did for a really long time in my life is that I was looking to others to ultimately show me the way and give me the answers. And maybe that's why people listen to podcasts sometimes, right? Like hopefully finding an insight that someone's going to say that's really going to guide them in some sort of meaningful direction. But it's taken me years to ultimately integrate this and really like really even understand. It's kind of that mind. It's kind of like mindset, right? It's like, well, what the hell does that mean? Um, and what I've learned, at least over the course of my career, is that um, there's already a lot of wisdom inside of me, right? And um, there's a ton of wisdom inside of me, and there's a clear direction that life wants me to go into. But I just got to create the space to ultimately listen. And I don't need anyone to ultimately answer that for me. I just ultimately need to create the space so that I can get the guidance and get the answers to make the right decisions. And so that's what I did for months, really, and to be able to arrive at the clarity to then be able to start this company called Hum. And um, what I learned in that process was that what I really wanted for my life more than anything was that I wanted to be the kind of man that was absolutely totally in love with my person, my partner. I wanted to be the kind of man that was working on really big, ambitious things. It's just my nature. I've always been that way. And I've always wanted to be the kind of man that just showed up for the things that I deemed mattered. And I wanted to stop making fucking excuses
mm.
as to why I wasn't doing something or showing up in a particular kind of way in my life. Um, and in that exploration is really where the seed of what Hum is really came to be. And before we heard the products or whatever it is, what really came to me was I want to help families. I want to bring families closer together as I was exploring that for myself and really creating my own family ultimately. And I think with any company, you first have to live the mission if you really truly want to be in integrity with it before you actually go out there and really sell it. And that's what my journey was. My journey was all about living the mission. And on the other side of living the mission came the seed to really want to share this with a lot of other people. Um, but yeah, that's a little bit about the backstory. But really, what Hum is,
Well, it
uh,
also helps bridge the gap of what I just asked you earlier, which
yeah,
was the transition from um, making a bunch of money and the miserable millions into a business that has soul,
that's right.
right? So that is the path and it fits in well. So I appreciate you laying that foundation.
Yeah, and I'm the happiest I've ever been in my whole life. Like
You look
I'm,
happy.
yeah, dude. Like I'm stoked.
Love it.
And all those things that I said are my actual reality every day in life. And so it's an honor, it's a privilege to go to work every single day and to serve our customers because that is the lens. I am not tired. I'm willing to show up for the things that are hard. And when someone comes across our brand, when we talk about branding, marketing, and sales, like it's a felt experience, which is what branding is at the highest level. It's not what you say, it's what people feel.
Mhm.
And to be able to transfer that, everyone wants to design an incredible brand, but first you got to be the brand because does every business have to do that? Absolutely not. You can just be a soulless individual, soulless company. And so many people have absolutely succeeded doing that.
There's a big
But,
spectrum.
but I don't want to fucking do that.
Yeah.
That's not me. And so you just got to see like what's actually true to you. It's been my path.
So what is Hum?
Um, I think about it as like health, home management meets health and meets automation. It's really the the combination of those three things, which I've been extremely passionate about over the course of my life. Um, Hum is on a mission. Hum is on a mission to help entrepreneurs make the number one hire that they can really make for their families, which is a home manager. And a home manager is really the person who does all the thinking, does all the doing, and does all the managing around the house, which is really all the things that are taking time away from you being with your spouse, you spending more time with your family. And what we do is we build systems for the home so that we can have all these things really run on autopilot without you having to micromanage any piece of the process. And we train those house managers on that system so that they can operate independently of you having to tell them what to do. That's like the first layer of what we do. And then, really, the second layer, which is really the heart of my passion, is really pushing the boundaries of what people think it's possible in their home and what's really possible in their health. And a lot of what we do is really just inquire about what you're optimizing for in this season of your life, whether that be better sleep, whether that be to lose weight, whether that be to gain a certain level of muscle or create a healthy home, have a low EMF environment. We've partnered with some of the world class experts in all these individual fields. We've created playbooks as it relates to all those things. We're able to come in your home, we're able to audit what you're doing well, what the gaps are, and we've curated some of the world's best products as it relates to these things. And we get to fill that gap and really help you have the energy for the things that you want to do in your life at the end of the day, have the time and the energy.
Awesome. So the to close the loop on this, Zion has a company placing assistants and integrating them into entrepreneurs' lives to help automate their life, right? And from my perspective, I look at that and say, oh, I can just tack on this other shit,
Right.
right? Add some more products into the house and
Yeah.
build on the framework that already exists. And that would be my fundamental approach, which isn't right or wrong, but it would
Right.
be my approach. And you immediately kind of looked at me cross-eyed and you were like, well, it's a totally different mission. And so,
Yeah.
why not do that and transform the mission of that brand and company versus launching a new company entirely?
Yeah. So interesting enough, that's how we started.
Ah,
Because we wanted to move very quickly. So we actually um, launched the first version of this under Atlas, and it absolutely just started to take off. Um, but we either had to do one or two things. Either Atlas had to become something entirely different than what it was, and or we just needed to create something that had its own identity.
mm,
And the message of Atlas was all around helping entrepreneurs live in their zone of genius. Um, and where the mission of Hum was all around like bringing families closer together. And so, from a branding standpoint, the energetic feel of like what was going to be transferred in our messaging and our branding, the also like home is something that's just so freaking personal. I mean,
yeah.
I think it's the most intimate way of being able to serve somebody. Um, and it just became super evident that we were building two completely um, different companies. And um, yeah, it wasn't an energetic match to what we wanted to do here. And it almost felt like building this company was going to be a distraction to Atlas because it would have ended up eating the majority of the resources there anyway. So, I mean, it's something we thought long and hard about.
Hmm.
Um, that's kind of how we arrived at our answer.
Love it. Um, Pedro, uh, what advice do you have for brand new entrepreneurs starting out?
Take action, move, move your feet, launch quickly, get learnings, validate. Um, don't be discouraged if something doesn't work. That is part of the process. The amount of things that I've tried over the last 4 months that haven't worked is massive. But get those learnings. Don't be afraid to roll up your sleeves um, and try something new. And don't stop doing that ever. And don't be ever too cool to talk to your customers.
Mm,
Um, Yeah, it's the mindset of the lean startup. I mean, I just absolutely really love the message of that book. Um, Create experiments, test things, learn from them, figure out if you're on the right track or not, and then don't be afraid to iterate and do that really, really fast because you're always competing with resources. And so I think it's the most important thing. But I think that entrepreneurs need to do that as well, even if they're not brand new.
Yeah.
You have to have that mindset, even if you're running an 8-figure company or even a 9-figure company. Never be too cool to learn
Yeah.
and move quickly.
Yeah. Couldn't agree more. Where do you want to point people?
Humhome.co.
Humhome.co. HUMHOME.co.
Got it.
Pedro, always good talking to you, man.
Likewise, brother.